Thank you very much. Yeah, you can hear me, it's perfect. Donc, je vais passer au français pour présenter notre prochain orateur, qui est donc Christophe Ballif, que j'imagine beaucoup d'entre vous connaissent déjà. Donc, Christophe Ballif est de nationalité suisse et a commencé par des études en physique, puis une thèse sur les...
Louder, please. Closer to the micro.
Pardon?
Plus, il faut que tu approches.
I'm here.
Alors, ok. Est-ce que vous m'entendez mieux maintenant?
Non, pas trop.
Pas trop. Alors, je ne sais pas trop quoi faire.
Non, ça rapprocher, c'était bien un moment.
D'accord, je vais manger le micro, comme ça on m'entendra mieux. Voilà, donc Christophe Ballif, je disais, donc, il a commencé par des études en physique à l'EPFL, puis une thèse sur les dicalcogénures. Puis ensuite, il est passé par différents centres de recherche. Donc, j'ai noté notamment le NREL dans le Colorado, où il a travaillé sur les couches minces et les composés 3,5. Puis l'Institut Fraunhofer-Ise à Freiburg, où il a notamment coordonné une ligne de production pilote en silicium. Puis l'EMPA, l'Université de Neuchâtel, qui est devenue depuis le PFL, où il est aujourd'hui professeur ordinaire donc à l'EPFL et où il dirige le laboratoire de photovoltaïque et couches minces électroniques. J'ai vu qu'il était également directeur du CSEM PV Center, qui est un centre qui se focalise sur le transfert de technologie et le soutien à l'industrie. Il est aujourd'hui le co-auteur de plus de 520 articles scientifiques, de nombreux brevets. Il est notamment le lauréat du prix Becquerel 2016. Et donc, on vient tous d'apprendre qu'il va être aussi le prochain, si j'ai bien compris, président du comité Becquerel. Voilà, merci beaucoup et je vous donne la parole.
Oui, bonjour Nathanaël, bonjour mesdames, messieurs, bonjour Joachim Luther. I was asked to speak in French, so I apologize, but I'm sure the translator will do a great job. Donc, je vais parler en français et dans les 20 minutes.
So I'm going to speak in French, and during the 20 minutes that have been allotted to me, I would like to thank the organizers. I'm going to try to talk about a few general aspects of photovoltaic technology and some specific aspects that are going to enable us to change the world and also to bring in many new or some new potential applications. The two reasons why we're developing photovoltaic energy is the fact of being able to render our energy generation cheaper, but sustainable, and of course to fight against global warming. As you know, there's been huge progress over the last 30 years. That means that today you can purchase standard modules for roughly 20 cents per peak watt. In France, 1 peak watt gives you 1 kilowatt hour, and this corresponds it's a very low price of roughly 40–50 euros per square meter. You can easily calculate this and realize that by investing 45 euros in a module, be able to produce between 6,000 and 12,000 kilowatt hours over a period of 30 years. 12,000 kilowatt hours in a sunny country, for instance. In France, so you compare to oil, petrol, even it comes from Asia, it'll be 15 times cheaper. So the macroeconomic rationale is proven. It's cheap, as some have already explained in the videos and in many presentations. We have less than 2 cents per kilowatt hour proposals. And if we're able to manage solar electricity, so this will make electric generation very cheap. Now, what is the challenge that is facing humanity? I like to show this figure that shows our energy consumption annually. So 162,000 terawatts. And in this figure, we see that essentially we have fossil fuels, 80% hydraulic, which is in blue here, and the renewals that hope for the future of humanity and to decarbonize our economies. So what we have to do is divide or multiply by a certain number of things that we're doing in the area of renewables, realizing that in these graphs we have to multiply the renewables by a factor of 3 to have the equivalent amount of energy generated as with fossil fuels. Is it possible to do it, and is it meaningful to do it? That's what I'm going to demonstrate. Just to realize the orders of scale, I've taken here some scenarios by Christian Breyer shows that the reduction in costs of different these technologies, and these scenarios differ whether you're in one part of the world or another, but to going from the fossil fuel system to a renewable system, whatever whichever way you look at it, it will mean that you have a huge increase generation of electricity with the solar for cars, for heat. There'll be wind energy, biomass, and hydraulic energy, but the increase in capacity, which is limited. And we're talking about 25, 40 terawatts of photovoltaic by 2050, which is a substantial quantity. That means basically that currently produced every year, there's 130 gigawatts of solar panels. We're going to have to go up to 10 or 12 terawatts to be able to attain these objectives in terms of decarbonization. So we're going to increase the production of PVs. And all these scenarios from government agencies are really very shy of the truth. For example, Irina talking only about 8 terawatts by 2050. And it's 4 or 5 times too weak. How much would it cost to put all this in place? There's been very good cost analysis, and we realized that if we wanted to have 1.5 terawatts of annual production by solar cells, with the improvements that have been made in improving production lines with silicon wafers, and solar cells with modules, would have to 180 billion euros. If we do this in the next 10 years, we should invest 18 billion per year for 10 years, so as to continue to contribute substantially to the decarbonization of the planet. And military expenditures, 2 trillion per year. So this is peanuts compared to military expenditure. Now, it also means that there's still a lot of room for research and innovation, because we're far from having attained the limits of what the sun can offer us. Now, if you try to install solar panels on your roofs, you will notice that these panels change every year. Here's an example of a panel with 60 cells with silicon wafers that are roughly the 56 by 56, and you see that the power of these modules increases year by year, and it is linked to the improvement in technologies, but also in changes in technology when it comes to the manufacturing of these cells themselves. And we also realize that once we've done what we need to do is rear contact systems, where we had 29.4%, which are at 26.7% now, will be very close to the 29.4. And this limit is the limit at the moment. Now, there are different ways of producing these cells. There are different types of architectures. So there are 50 or 60 different possible architectures for solar panels, solar cells. And the main architectures are the you've got silicium, and the front, so at the back you have a dielectric that pierces the surface with little openings that allow the aluminium to dope the back of the cell. This is a standard approach which replaced the aluminum-backed approach, but there are other interesting approaches, like the TOPCon. We have oxide layers, means that the metallic contact doesn't touch the silicon, which increases tension or voltage. And you have heterojunction with very fine layers of amorphous silicon, enables to have higher voltages. Each of these technologies has pros and cons, and if the record is a cell that has no contact at the front, all the contacts at the back. It's an interdigital contact solar cell. And the market is developing very fast, and the market is always right. We've noticed in a few years the technology of with just aluminium and the back face has been completely replaced by the PERC type, multi-PERC technology, which have a much higher efficiency. We're in this situation in 2020. We have 9 market. It was with crystalline silicon with PERC technology that sells between 22 and 23% yield, with a record of 23.7% yield. There are a few gigawatts reserved for more advanced, like the TOPCon and heterojunction, where production reaches 24%, and for some of the highest yields, 24.8 for TOPCon and 25.1% for heterojunction cells. There are products that are even better, IBC that goes up to 25%. Now, the market can change very quickly, and there's only one part for the thin film, but a company that is very successful, and one that is First Solar, that's working with cadmium. Now, the question that is often raised, is all this clean, and can this save humanity? And I think we have to try and answer these questions. The further question concerns the origin of the materials for solar cells. I'm not to go into the details, but generally speaking, like in all sectors, there is no problem in having the raw materials that we need to make as many panels as we want. But can this really decarbonize the world? And this implies a yield and a payback time and CO2 reduction, which would be notable. So huge improvements make it possible to, with improved manufacturing, to be able to produce these panels. One of the first examples, which is important, is the way of preparing the polysilicon. It's a gas that's going to be purified that contains silicon. And we can, which is the most energy consuming phase, to work with huge reactors. We're going to inject the gas, and a filament of silicon will therefore crystallize this gas, and we have reflectors inside of these reactors. We have tubular filaments that increase the growth and the nucleation in the initial phase of the crystallization. And thanks to all this, we are now capable of using less than 45 kilowatt hour per kilo of silicon gas crystallized. So 5 times less energy to produce polysilicon material. This is a huge gain in terms of energy consumption. Another thing, which is something that has not been noticed by the non-specialists, the use of different layers with multi-wire sewing. It's a wire that goes 5,000 times between different wafers with a additional mix of small particles. We replace this by wires with microdiamonds. Instead of losing 200 microns of material, we only lose 60 microns of material with a diamond wire. So the same price, you can make practically 60% more wafers. So we save in terms of silicon, and we save in terms of energy. On top of technological advances, we've also changed the manner, the way of connecting, the interconnecting the modules, so as to save money. having more major contact lines that provide the interconnection of the cells with copper, and covering the cells one over the other, and piling of the cells, and then putting even more of these bars, we can save money and at the same time increase yield, so that yield of the volume, which will better, and with bigger PERC type modules that are close to 21%, which is remarkable for mainstream products of this time. This brings us to the fact to say that we can, in 2018 and 2020, have a reduction of the use of silicon of roughly 17 to 3 grams per watt, from 17 to 3.5 grams per watt. So we conclude that for 1 watt, we would need roughly 0.5 or 0.8 kilowatt hours for the manufacturing of the panel. And then afterwards, we can look at the production of CO2. And this depends on how we produce the glass, the silicon, and the energy mix in the countries. So we have something of roughly 300 grams per watt, which is equivalent of 7 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour. And if we work with the Chinese mix of electricity, it's 2.5 to 3 better per kilowatt hour. And anyway, much better than coal and gas. There's an extraordinary internet site that shows how many years we can emit CO2 at the pace that we're doing now. And according to optimistic, 42 gigatons per year. It's a bit more with agriculture, in fact. We can be within 1.5% heating. We have only 7 years. So needless to say that the scenario is already of 1.5 is very unrealistic. Okay, now I'll pass on to my colleague.
$30 terawatt photovoltaic. This means 9 gigatons of CO2. If we're talking China, this climbs to 25 gigatons. So wind, 10 terawatt. The 5 gigaton of CO2. This is a little more aggressive in batteries as well. So 60 kilo CO2 per kilowatt hour storage capacity, so 12 gigatons of CO2. We need to keep about 25 gigatons of emissions, or 2.5% of what remains to emit for the energy transition with current best practice. And it's even better if we deploy this quickly, because the closer we move to a low carbon economy, the better things get. So we'll move towards solar panels that have pretty much a 0 CO2 impact. What does this mean? Once we've done all this, we will continue to improve on the technology, but at some point in time, we will hit a ceiling, because that's due to the intrinsic limitations of silicon. And we'll have to switch to something we already saw before, switch to alternative or complementary solutions to silicon. Now, what about the potential technologies that have good efficiency and acceptable cost? Perovskite-based solar cells. So perovskite on silicon, or perovskite on perovskite. So tandem cells. But let's remember there are other potential materials we can use. We'll continue to do research and development on how to better use light with other types of semiconductors. The goal being to ensure compatibility between these new materials with silicon, because that's the best entry point into the market. Silicon is in the infrared. So that's the ideal solar cell already. It's already on the market. There is a lot we can do with solar. You're familiar with solar panels on roofs, on carports. In the last few minutes I will look at our different possibilities. Well, obviously I'm from Switzerland, so this is This is a product made in Switzerland. It's a Tissot watch, and I happen to be wearing one. And this is the most beautiful sundial in the world. Thin film, 0 defect. And excellent battery life. This is a beautiful Christmas present, by the way. And also, it's a mixture of photovoltaic and the Internet of Things. It's an energy source that is easy to wear and easy to distribute. So what about basic materials? The sun is cheap, and it's an opportunity to develop all kinds of applications. And this is what we do. We work on materials, polymers, encapsulation processes for a number of original applications. For example, a growing number of cars and trucks and boats want to be covered in solar cells. And so we have developed solutions to make that happen. They are unbreakable, they are extreme weather resistant. Alchemiri used this boat to get close to the North Pole. Or you can go to the Antarctic in a canoe. This is Raphaël Dangeron's boat that went around the world, and it's solar powered. Planes, drones, you name it. This is a plane that will go as high as the stratosphere. Very lightweight planes and flying vehicles, solar impulse in particular. So you can do all kinds of things with solar. DHP is an innovative company. They develop deployable systems. You can deploy these systems on top of roads or water processing stations. So some countries are very sensitive to acceptance of PV in rural and urban areas. Obviously, we're sensitive to aesthetics. We would want our solar panels to look like this, our cow on the right-hand side. Now, both in Swiss and in the rest of Europe, there is a growing number, an impressive number of solutions that are developing solutions for integrating PV into buildings. What's interesting is that these special solutions can be used at a local level. And you get to work with Asian companies for very specific projects, PV integrated projects. So the price is affordable and the potential is huge. In Switzerland, this would be enough to fund the energy transition and cover 25% of our country's energy needs in a low carbon fashion. So these are examples of PV roof systems. 12,000 megastate systems have already been installed. In 2014, we improved solar cells so much, I mean the infrared solar cells, that we can actually do without the visible spectrum. Starting 2014, using a polymer-based platform, we will develop the very first PV cells using the visible spectrum. So the yield rate is 13%, and the materials are interesting. So we try to sell them in 2016. Actually, that was 2017. We try to sell them to the White House, and they wouldn't see us, unfortunately. But I do think we would get better reception this time, and we're able to factor PV into existing buildings. These are our latest achievements. This is a building that is entirely PV powered. So these are examples of projects. See, terracotta buildings, we use a crystalline system because it's cheap. Now, these are fully solar powered systems, renovations. People like it. They like this terracotta look, and they're willing to pay extra to have a solar roof. And it blends in nicely with the landscape, as you can see in this village. Okay, so solar tiles. Oh, this is the fine arts equivalent of PV. Now, this probably wasn't the cheapest system, but it really shows that there are things you can do, and you can make PV pretty. To go the extra mile, these are beautiful examples of solar tiles. The question is, can we go further than just providing incentives or auctions, or we can try to raise awareness. We can get them to want to buy PV, maybe use social pressure, or simply because it's beautiful. And this is why, in recent years, We try to capture people's imaginations and dreams via our communications efforts. We were able to develop these high-res pictures. No, these are crystal-based PV cells. And from an architectural point of view, it looks beautiful. This is an exhibition we organized with Lionel Paré, a photographer. A couple of examples which are extraordinary, I think. These are PV panels. And PV panels are now being used in several projects, exhibitions around the lake. 100 kilowatt hour per square meters. That's enough to make the most of these panels and also raise awareness of the potential of this technology. So the technology is growing ground. We're organizing exhibitions. People realize that you can do a lot of things with solar. And we have private citizens asking us for these types of products. This is private house in Neuchâtel. So basically turning solar cells into a work of art. This is a beautiful mural made up of solar cells, and it looks like you're entering a castle. So you can use PV technology not just in large PV farms, but also on your roof, in your garden, on your walls. Chances are local protection for specialty products, but also as part of an EU that is trying to generate 250 gigawatt per year. Well, obviously industry is moving fast, but we need further research, further R&D. There are thousands of new things we can do. What we need is for Edmond Becquerel to have many more children. So we are all Edmond Becquerel's children, and we need many more of us to develop these technologies. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup. Et
Thank you.
encore une fois, merci pour la beauté des objets que vous nous avez présentés.
Thank you.
Notamment
The objects that you showed us are absolutely beautiful.
Et je vais enchaîner
Sight for
sur une
sore
question
eyes.
tout de suite de Mohamed Sherif qui demande
We have a question from Mohamed
de la
Sherif.
coloration de ces cellules solaires à base de silicium cristallin.
The sound is too poor. The interpreter could not hear the question. The sound is too weak. We can't betray any trademark, any trade secrets, but what we use is digital ceramic printing. And this provides sustainable images. The loss of yield is acceptable. I will leave it to the discretion of our distinguished audience to find out what can be done using these technologies. I have a new
Daniel
question
Fichet qui dit que les progrès des modules sont impressionnants, mais qu'il faut aussi inclure dans le bilan global le coût économique, énergétique, écologique, de l'adaptation du réseau. Donc, quelles sont d'après vous les solutions qui vous semblent les plus prometteuses dans ce domaine, donc l'adaptation du réseau?
Could the speaker please put on headphones with a built-in microphone? The interpreter can't hear. I suggest you read Breyer's articles on the impact of solar and wind on the European grid. This article shows two things. First of all, we'll need batteries to store energy, store electricity, to avoid a peak demand in the network. Now, when you look at the entire footprint by 2050, you come up with a power generation system that is even cheaper than what we have now. So yes, adjustments must be made, but prices mean that this will limit our need to adjust the system. What we need is to be able to store the energy when we have it and be able to use it when we need it. Over the very long term, of course, we'll need buffers.
Justement, c'est une question encore de Capucine Tong qui demande qu'en est-il de la production d'hydrogène par le PV.
What about hydrogen production using PV? Yes, we need a lot of PV because that's how we generate our energy using power to gas. This is true for industrial processes, long-range transport, even aviation. But obviously, this has been factored into the scenario I showed you. But there are many other scenarios because you need a primary source of energy, and we're talking the new renewable energies. So using hydrogen, for example, we're starting to find that hydrogen solutions that are
Je pense qu'il est l'heure de clore cette session. Je
even more
remercie
so
encore
than current hydrogen solutions.
les présentateurs et je
Time to
redonne la
close this
parole donc
session.
à Jérôme. Merci beaucoup.
Handing over now to Jérôme. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It was a wonderful session. We learned a lot of things. And this is now time for a short break of 10 minutes. We meet each other at 3:55 for the next session on state of the art of photovoltaic deployment. Thank you very much.